Welcome to Westview Sailing and Yachting Monthly videos. This month, it's Berthing Blunders. I'm Duncan Wells, RYA instructor and features writer for Yachting Monthly. I'm going to take you through it.
In October, we covered 3 classic berthing blunders. I don't really like the expression berthing blunders because it makes it sound as though we're incompetent, and we're not. But there are occasions when the conditions, the wind and the tide, catch us out, and we end up making a rather inelegant departure from or return to our berth. It's interesting to note that having spent all day placing boats at odd angles and being very careful to have everything nicely fended up, I managed to nerf Dorothy Lee as I returned her to her berth. The mark polished out very easily, but it was a handy reminder that I must be careful not to suffer from any delusions of adequacy. So how can we help ourselves? Well, first, we need to see what the elements, the wind and the tide, will do to us, and then use them to our advantage. With the boat on the dock, check the wind, check the tide. The wind instruments will show you where the wind is coming from and its strength. Or you can look up at the wind indicator on the top of the mast and see. Here the wind is beam on our port side, which will blow us off the dock. As it happens, that's nor-northwest, a wind of about 10 knots. So what's the tide doing to us? The tide is ebbing. We're pointing upstream, and so the tide will push us out of the berth, and the wind will blow us off the dock. So, if we just let the lines go, we'd drift out of the berth, and the wind would probably blow the bow off, and we'd end up facing the shore and drifting onto the downstream berths. As a matter of interest, when looking at the direction in which the tide is flowing, make sure you look at what the water well below the surface is doing. This is what's going to affect your keel. Often water on the surface can be showing you what the wind is doing rather than the tide. Here, though, in the shelter of the dock, there's really not much wind ruffling the surface water. Check the lower water by looking at the fronds of seaweed that are attached to the dock. Check which way they're going. As for the speed of the tide, we'll use the old trick for measuring boat speed when the log is broken. Throw something biodegradable that will float in at the bow and start counting seconds. Stop when it's reached the stern, and then it's 5 times the seconds you counted, divided into 3 times the boat length in feet to give you the speed in knots.
In this instance, I'm going to try and find a bit of seaweed that flies down. Here we go. Nice big bit of seaweed there. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25. That will do us. So 5 lots of 25, 125, divided into 3 lots of 35, which is 105. So 105 divided by 125, 0.8 of a knot, something like that. That is the speed of the tide at this particular moment right here.
You can tell what will happen to the boat when you let go just by looking at what's happening with the mooring warps. Here the back spring has some tension in it from the tide, and the bow line has quite a bit of tension from the wind blowing us off, while the head spring is completely slack, as is the stern line. So we could lose the stern line and head spring. They're not doing anything. Also, check if a line is actually doing anything before you hang on to it for dear life. How many times have you seen crew furiously holding the bow and stern line when the boat is actually being pinned onto the dock by the wind and the tide? They could let go of everything, go and have a cup of tea, and the boat wouldn't go anywhere, probably, but you know what I mean. Being in tune with the wind and the tide is what's going to save our bacon every time. The next thing to consider is how your boat handles under engine. Specifically, does she have a strong kick in any direction when going astern? This is caused by prop walk. To find out which way she kicks astern, run her astern on the dock and look over the side. Make sure your spring is stout enough to take the strain, of course. One will generally find that one side is calm and the other is turbulent, and she will kick in the direction of the calm side. Right-handed propellers that turn clockwise as you look at the propeller will have a slight kick to starboard in ahead and a kick to port when they're turning anti-clockwise in astern. Left-handed propellers that turn anti-clockwise as you look at them will have a slight kick to port in ahead and a kick to starboard in astern. and the heavier displacement boats suffer from this to a greater degree than light short-fin keel boats, because there's more boat in the water. So they need a good deal of effort to get way on, and so the boat will move sideways before it starts to move forward or astern. This is more noticeable in astern than ahead, but is nonetheless still there when one starts to motor ahead. We're running the engine astern, and you can see an enormous amount of turbulence coming out on the port side. We added in an extra spring to take the strain, and on starboard the water is calm, a clear indication that the boat will kick to starboard astern. Knowing what to expect from our boat under engine is very important. And that's all very well until we get it wrong. Marinas are deceptive places. You'd think there was no one on any of the boats, until you make a mistake, and voices are raised, then heads will pop up from everywhere, and you'll have a fine audience. So if we can resist the temptation to shout the minute it goes wrong, then we may be left alone to correct the error. Briefing the crew is very important. Tell them how you intend to leave or to approach the berth. I discuss all the options with them, show them which warps are doing what, and go through what we can expect when we let go. And if we've arrived at an alarming angle in our slot, blown off by the wind, and have come to rest on the neighbour, who will always be there, by the way. He visits his boat very rarely, but he will be there when you get it wrong. Then we need to have a plan, partly because we need a plan, and partly to let him know that we do know what we're doing, but that we just got caught out. First of all, make sure you have fenders in all the right places to protect both boats. Now get a member of crew off by the bow to the shore or by the stern onto the neighbour's boat, having asked his permission first, and do tell the crew to go across the foredeck and not through the cockpit. Then we need a line from the bow to the shore to make sure the boat can't go anywhere, and then a line from the stern cleat. It might be tempting to try and lasso the cleat on the shore from the boat, but this is a tall order. Or you might fancy throwing the line to the crewman, but both these are likely to end up with the line in the water and further delay. So just hand the crewman the line. It's safer. Then it's a matter of him hauling you back into your berth. Not like this, or this, but like this. How many times have you seen 7 stone of woman trying to pull in 7 tons of boat while standing in the water ski position? It's not her fault, of course, but she's the one who's got to try and sort it out. Get it under a cleat. Get some purchase on that line. What if we overshoot and are blown past our berth? We're now facing the shore. It's a dead end, and we need to get back out and try again. It's best to start over again rather than try and rescue a situation. We need to turn round or back out. The long keelers, the Contessa 32s, the Victoria 38s, the gaff riggers are all shaking their heads at this point. Not me, sonny. We just don't go astern, some may say. And I do understand it's not easy in these types of boat, but something should be possible. It's worth finding a quiet spot and practicing to see what can be done and how severe prop walk could be used to advantage. Dorothy Lee has a long fin and skeg configuration with a pivot point at the front of the keel, and so the bow blows off just like that, and this makes it tricky going astern in a crosswind. You need so much speed to stop the bow blowing off that it's dangerous in confined spaces. Conversely, I know that her stern will find the wind, and we can use this to advantage. We also have the advantage of a barn door of a rudder and distance from prop to rudder, and so can send a blast of thrust against this to start a crash turn. With prop walk to starboard astern, we'll turn the rudder hard a port, give a good thrust of ahead, enough to get the bow turning, but not so much that we actually start to get any way on, and then we'll put the engine astern and continue this swing to port by getting the prop walk to walk our stern to starboard. Then it's another blast of ahead to keep the turn going, and in all it takes about 5 bursts of ahead and 4 bursts of astern to get round 180 degrees in our own length. Handy. Of course, my friend Derek just points his Geno where he wants to go and drives astern, much as we would have driven ahead. You can effect a crash turn with long keelers, but it takes a lot longer to get round because there's so much boat in the water, and you start differently. With a long keeler, you can only throw about half the amount of thrust off the rudder as you can with a long fin and skeg configuration, because the propeller on a long keeler is set into the rudder. So one starts the turn with the rudder amidships, and a blast of astern to get the stern moving in the correct direction. Let's say she kicks to port astern. By moving the stern to port, we will have moved the bow to starboard and have started the turn. So, with the stern walking to port, put in full starboard helm and give a blast of a head. Then it's astern and ahead and astern and ahead until you're facing the other way. It's about 10 bursts of each to get around 180 degrees in a long keeler, so I'm reliably informed by Yachting Monthly's editor Kieran Flatt, and he has a beautiful long keel Twister 28. And don't forget that we also want to berth or moor into the tide if we can. That way we can use it as a brake. Berthing with the tide makes it harder to stop, because even when you're stationary in the water, the tide will be running you through the berth or mooring. Fendering up is important. You need fenders at pontoon height for the side you dock, but if you have a neighbour, it's a good idea to have fenders at gunwale height on the side next to him. Here's a handy tip which works on a lot of boats, well, pretty much all 35-foot sailing boats. A fender that is set down to the water and up a fraction for pontoon height becomes a fender set at gunwale height when you bring it under the lower guard wire and over the upper guard wire. So if you're coming into an unfamiliar port and you don't know if you'll be given a berth on a pontoon or rafted up, or which side, port or starboard, then set 3 fenders on either side for pontoon height. One on the shoulder, one amidships and one on the quarter. And in a flash, these can be converted to gunwale height if you find you're to raft up. Set a bow and stern line on both sides as well. In the article, we also talked about what to do if you found yourself pinned on by the tide to the end of a pontoon or the stern of another boat, in the classic T-bone position. We floated a line down to them to pull the bow out, and this worked well. We also tried to get the boat off by springing the bow out. But this wasn't very successful, as the Sadler 29 with a bilge keel didn't want to do this at all. We discovered later that they will spring off if you have the spring line secured to a point on the shore forward of the bow, and we were asking here to spring out on a much shorter line. When berthing, you need to plan what you will do based on the wind and the tide. You need to brief your crew, you need to have plan B, and you need to brief your crew about this too. And if it's a matter of staying out for an extra hour or so to make sure that you'll be berthing into the tide, then do that. Or better still, plan your departure and return around the tide. It'll make for a much easier life. And above all, always have one eye on what the wind and the tide will do to the boat. And if you haven't seen the Berthing Blunders article, you'll find it in the October 2012 issue of Yachting Monthly. Check out our other articles: Aids to Navigation, Destination St Helier, 7 Steps to Drying Out, How to Enter a Busy Port Safely. And don't forget to look at the Westview Sailing video tutorials, where you'll find all the elements of the shore-based day skipper and yachtmaster courses explained clearly and hopefully in an entertaining way. They've helped thousands of students. Thank you to Jamie at Universal Marina, Justin at Universal Marina, and Universal Marina in general for all their help. And of course, thanks to John Lewis Partnership Sailing Club for the loan of Narama and Derek Manning for the loan of Celtic Spirit. And now, I'd better get some more polish. I expect there'll be plenty more marks that'll need rubbing out in the future.